paint that glue in there and make sure that I coat all of it everywhere, right down to the point. I'm using a solution of glue that's a little bit thinner than what I would use for sinew backing so that it penetrates the wood better. Lower viscosity, better penetration into the wood. And I keep these parts warm because that aids in the absorption of the glue. So now I'm going to put this all back together inside the heating pad, wrap it up again and let it sit for about an hour. And let that stuff absorb the glue. I'm going to take this out first though because I don't want to accidentally glue that to the pieces. Make sure you got a nice coating on there. The wood absorbs the glue incredibly fast when it's hot. So I might just leave it like this and then lay something over the top of it to keep the heat in. It's important to keep this stuff warm. Joining of these pieces, I'm going to work very fast. They've been heated, they've been sized, the sizing coat is dry. What I'm going to do now is clamp this into my table at just about the right angle so that I can glue this piece in, and I can force the two pieces together and clamp everything down tight. So I'm going to quick check this, check that the angle's fine, so I can force that in there and hold it in place. It's good. Now what I do is I put the glue on, working quick, put plenty of glue on. I'm going to end up splattering glue on everything, but you know, you can just clean everything up when you're done. Get a lot of glue in here because a lot's going to get squeezed out. I found that working with your fingers seems like it's a hell of a lot better than working with tools when you're in a big hurry. I'm just checking the joint to see if I see any spots where there isn't obviously glue between the two pieces. And if I see any places where the joint is apparently too thick, I put another clamp there. But you know, a little bit of black language and some panicky work, and we've got this thing put together pretty well. I'm pleased with it. Now it's just a question of coating the joints well, because as the glue dries, it tends to contract, and the glue will get sucked into the joint by the material that's already in there. So I just want to make certain that as it gets sucked in, there's more on the outside to pull in after it. So we get a nice tight glue-filled joint. Of course, if you don't like it, if you don't think it worked out well, what you do is the very next day you take these clamps off, you put a little bit of stress on the piece, and if you hear creaking or cracking, you can always just pop that thing back out of there again, soak it in water, play a little bit of heat on it and take it out, sand it out, recut the joint, and redo the whole thing. All things considered, when you're going to take months to make a bow, taking a couple of extra hours to redo the joint doesn't really amount to a lot of extra effort. Just have to make sure that all these things are done the right way.
Now, whenever I've built composite bows, which is only a handful to date, I've never grooved. And Jeff states that about, I believe it's 1/3 of original composite bows were probably grooved. Which, what that does is create more gluing surface contact to absorb all those stresses. And I could never figure out how it could be done. And after watching what Jeff's doing here, it's just so simple. So we'll just let Jeff explain to us in a minute exactly what he's got and what he's doing.
Okay, what I've got here is a guide that has a ledge on it that guides the tool. It has a trough that's slightly concave that the belly of the horn fits into. And I have a tool that's made out of, this particular one's made out of an old saw blade. It's got 12 teeth to the inch. And what I've done is grind those teeth down so that they're perfectly triangular. Little right triangles, right angle triangles, 12 to the inch. And I've made a handle out of maple that fits into, and I can move from side to side. I bind the horn into this trough, and I decide which part is the straightest that I plan on keeping for the bow. And I slide this back and forth in the trough. And that's all there is to it. Once I get all the grooves started and they're perfectly straight, I can take them out of the trough, I can bind it onto the workbench, and I can scrape with a hand scraper, which is made out of the rest of the blade of the saw. These two pieces together, this one to start, this one to finish, allows you to make these grooves almost perfectly straight. And 12 to the inch, perfectly straight grooves, triangular grooves, and there may be a 30th to maybe a 50th of an inch deep, at the very most maybe a 50th of an inch. This will double your surface area for gluing, or actually it increases it to 140% of what it would be if it were flat. It allows the horn to be bound onto the wood without any sideways slipping. It gives a real tight fit, and it's actually very easy to do. You could make a grooving tool with a machine shop, with a milling machine. Cost you quite a bit of money to do it on a computerized milling machine, or you can do it by hand, spend a couple of hours cutting out the teeth, and get a job that the tolerances are to within a couple thousandths of an inch, which is more than sufficient for this job because the glue line is a couple thousandths of an inch. So to restart, I just make sure that the tool is in one of the tracks, and I cut.
Once a certain depth is reached, Jeff has turned his form over, tied the horn to the opposite side, and now he's able to exert more pressure. His grooves were deep enough to keep the teeth within. And you're going to take them down, what, to the full depth of the teeth that you have, Jeff?
Yeah, I just sight down the grooves and make certain that they're ground to a point so that they're not flat topped. And once I reach that, everywhere along the entire length, I figure I'm finished. You can see the straightness. There may be, if you look at it edge on, you may see a real slight wobble in one or two places. But if you hold a steel straight edge up along them and sight along the straight edge, you don't see any bends, any wiggles. They are dead on, perfectly straight. And therefore, you have to realize that your eye is able to discern differences down to thousandths of an inch easily. The glue line is going to be 5 to 6 thousandths of an inch thick. So you are well within the, if you do things this way, you're well within the tolerances of the glue line, and you're going to end up with a very good joint.
All right, you spend how much time? Now, you've only spent, what, 2 hours, 2.5 hours on this?
Yeah, maybe closer to 3, because we started it earlier and ground away on it, but then that's 3 hours with a couple of breaks in between, sitting back to have a soda or a cup of coffee. This is about the 6th bowl that I've done this way, so a little bit of experience has made it go faster. But you don't have to do things this way. You do not have to put these grooves in. The only reason why I'm doing it is because this particular style of bow that I'm building is a quote-unquote replica of a Middle Eastern style of bow that did have these grooves. And in fact, only Turkish and Korean and a couple of other isolated nations built bows by putting these grooves in. You can make the back of the wood, or rather the belly of the wood and the back of the horn perfectly flat and smooth and join them together, or you can cut them slightly concave convex. And I have a grooving tool that is concave for the wood and convex for the horn, with teeth cut into it, that I would use to make a Turkish flight bow. So this particular operation you can regard as being optional, and it was not practiced by all the makers of these bows, but it does give you a very good joint with a lot of extra surface area, and the strength of a joint depends on the surface area of contact.
Okay, and then transferring this over to wood, it'd just be a piece of cake now, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, the wood itself grooves much more readily because it's coarser grain, it's a softer material, the tool bites into it more deeply. I have had to sharpen the tool once or twice while I've been cutting this into the horn.
Now, before he can cut grooves into the core to match the horn, what he's doing now is rasping down where the ear sticks out that he glued on. Got glued on yesterday. Now take note on the glue line of this splice. Almost appears as if it's one piece of wood. Jeff admits this is one of his better jobs. Why don't you explain a little bit, Jeff, about how you're getting that line started?
Well, what I've done is clamped a guide to the edge of the bow and put something underneath it to support it so that I can get the grooves started at least on the curved section. The flat section I can clamp into the guide the way I had done with the horn. But this curved section can be a little bit of a problem, so I use a slightly different method of just clamping a guide onto here and scraping the grooving tool along the guide to cut a series of guide cuts into the wood. And once they're a certain depth, say a quarter of the way down into the tooth, maybe a little more, I can take this metal strip off, just an old hacksaw blade, and then cut the grooves normally. Okay, you can see the grooves now, how they match up. Nice and straight, parallel. This is what's going to give the glued joint a little bit of extra strength, increases the surface area, keeps the piece from slipping sideways when we bind it. The next thing for us to do is to gently steam the horn while it's clamped into place on the wood so that any little deviations will be brought to conformity. Then we size it twice, let it dry, heat it up, put the glue on, and bind it in place.
What you see here is the bond that we're looking for between wood, which is on the top, and the horn. And on the left has a sinew layer. This is a cross section of what we're building, what Jeff is building.
Just gently steam the horn side of the two pieces clamped together tightly with the grooves lined up. I'm steaming the horn side because it's more plastic. It's going to mold, the heat will cause it to mold and bend and conform a little bit better to the wood. If there were any slight deviations between the horn and the wood, say thousandths of an inch, that's all the horn has to compromise by. And I just do this for a few minutes. I usually use a little more vigorous steam than what you got, what's visible here, but I regard this as being essential, and this just makes the pieces fit together a little bit better. What I'm going to do now is square up the sides of the wood and the horn so that they're flush together along the whole length of the bow. Both sides. I do this only for the purpose of making the gluing, the alignment of the two pieces with the glue on, go a little bit quicker because time is going to be very important there. This is not final shaping. That I do separately. I do it after the horn's attached. This is only to aid in lining up the two pieces for gluing because time is very, very important at that stage.
And you can see how close a fit the horn and the wood come, where they come together. It's just perfect. The grooves have lined exactly. What's being done now is Jeff is resurfacing. Right now the core, he'll do the exact same thing with the horn so that you have a completely free, sterile environment for the glue to stick to.